Welcome back to Leadership Explored, the podcast where we explore what it really means to lead in today's evolving workplace. Each episode, we explore strategies that help professionals navigate the messy realities and constant change in the world of work. I'm Ed Schaefer, and I'm joined by my co host, Andy Siegmund. Today, we're pausing the conversation and doing something a little different. Think of it this way: you can't navigate by staring down at your map and compass while you trudge through the woods. Effective leaders know they need to stop, look around, evaluate their surroundings, and pick the best path forward. That's why, after wrapping up season 1, we wanted to follow our own guidance. We tell you to embrace transparency, reflection, and honesty with yourself, so that's exactly what we're going to model today. We're taking time to conduct a retrospective on season 1, what worked, what didn't, and what we're going to change in the future. If you want to know the power of a retro, this episode is a demonstration to show you one of the ways we practice the skills and behaviors we talk about. Underneath it all is a leadership question. When you pause and look around, what will you do differently next time, and why?
I love that we're doing this, Ed, kind of moving into a retro here. I think it's anytime you come to sort of any closing point, right? End of a chapter, end of anything like that. I think it's important to look back and see what's going on and what's going well and what's not going well, right? Sports teams always have their end of season meetings right before they go into break, and I'm really glad that we're here and we're doing this. Admittedly, it is a little bit weird to do this as publicly as we're intending to. I know that that's part of the game, but usually these are closed door meetings, I'm just kind of looking forward to opening things up and sharing and working through this in public here.
Yeah, it might be a little bit uncomfortable compared to what we're normally used to, but I think it'll be valuable for us and for our audience. So, yeah, let's get into it. And I guess before we dive into our retrospective, I think we should quickly define what this practice is for our listeners in case you haven't heard of it, or if maybe you've heard of it, but you're not exactly sure what a retrospective is. So, a retrospective is a structured, usually or often regular meeting where a team or group pauses to reflect on recent work. And that work isn't always recent, right? You could retrospect on a full year or a whole project. The purpose is to identify what went well, what could be improved, and decide on actionable changes to make things better going forward. A lot of people have heard of this practice in the context of agile frameworks, but I think its value extends far beyond software teams. Executives, cross functional groups, and even individuals can benefit a lot from retrospectives. It can help foster learning, innovation, and continuous improvement. So, why do we do this? Retrospectives are important and powerful because they drive continuous improvement and help us become more effective over time. They create a safe, designated space for open feedback and prevent issues from festering or repeating over and over again. The most basic and common retrospective format is what went well, what didn't, and what will we change. But these are really, really adaptable. There are tons of formats that are out there that can keep them fresh or to help you focus on different problems or think in different creative ways. And people are constantly inventing new methods to help people feel safe and share what's on their mind in a directed way. The key to retrospectives being effective, I think, is transparency and honesty. People who get the best results are transparent and honest and willing to have the hard conversation, even if it's difficult. You can't fix what you won't face. And if you can't be honest with yourself or call out the hard things, you can't improve. So for us, our transparency starts with the numbers. We released 13 episodes for season 1, if we exclude introductions and trailers and things like that. And our total downloads for the season was around 500 in total. I know I was some amount of those downloads, and I'm sure you were too, Andy. So I guess if we were to view this show as a delivery project where we invested significant time and resources, what do you think overall? Do you see value in what we did? Did we gain something? And should we make an ongoing investment going forward?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, Ed. So I think that the TLDR is I think it's worth the investment, primarily because we set out with this goal to record a finite number of episodes, which we exceeded. Right, we said we were going to aim for 10, and we landed at 13 for this season. I think the data point that we were working on for 10 was that 10 is the threshold to be in like the top 1% of podcasts or something obnoxious like that, that I probably heard on a podcast and failed to actually fact check. But it sounded good. So we rolled with that. Um, we never set any sort of targets for downloads or exposure or anything like that. And if I recall correctly, the genesis of this was we were kind of having these conversations in the context of just like weekly or fortnightly one-on-ones, like just to hang out and keep in touch and talk shop. And we kind of use the idea of a podcast as a forcing function of like, hey, we want to continue doing this thing. So if we turn it into a project, then we'll have an obligation to do this thing. I still think the net cause is positive. I'm still enjoying the thought exercises and the conversations themselves. So on a super selfish level, yeah, I think it's super worthwhile. If we think about it from a pure commercial output. It's not commercialized, it's not monetized, but also outside of our labor, which I think for the most part we're enjoying. The like incremental cost to us to host and deliver this is pretty minimal. So from like an economics perspective, I just have a broad strokes like, nah, I don't really care about that aspect of it at the moment. So thoughts, yeah, what about you, Ed? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I fundamentally agree with you. I think it's still worth us making this investment. I'm generally enjoying doing it as long as I'm not overloaded in my day job or starting to experience burnout, which I think was part of our reason for doing this season break. And I do feel like it's valuable for me as far as the topics that we talk about and some of the preparation that goes into it, reading into some of these things, and then the thought exercise of actually talking through it and needing to have a standpoint and defending those points. Um, Initially I viewed it as an experiment. I know some people who are really experiment minded would say like, well, what was how do you validate if the experiment was worth it or not? And we didn't really set that either. We just kind of said, hey, let's record these and see what happens. And I guess for me, I still view it as an experiment. It's still something that we're learning and growing from. And who knows, maybe down the road it'll have some impact on getting hired at some job or finding coaching clients or something like that. But I think more or less the experiment is, what is it like to record these conversations? Can we make them valuable? And what is it like to actually put a podcast out? Was kind of some of the things I was looking at. Um, as far as the actual numbers, yeah, I do agree. We set that 10, which may have been arbitrary or apocryphal story. I'm not sure. We could probably look into that and see. Maybe we need to set a new goal based on what's the current top 1% of podcasts, and maybe we go that way. But um, I guess with a podcast, as far as I'm concerned, it always takes time to grow. So I'm not, I don't know, is 500 downloads good or is it bad? I don't really know. I don't really have that wasn't really a measurement I was thinking of. So I haven't really considered if I'm happy or not with that. And I guess fundamentally under it all, if there was one person who listened to one episode and they got a valuable tidbit of information that they were able to take back to work, or that changed the way that they lead or improved something in their workplace, then to me it would still be worth doing. Um, so I would say, yeah, my commitment is definitely long term. And I was thinking before this, as I was taking notes for my reflection, I was like, as long as Andy wants to do it, I'll keep doing it. And then I was like, well, you know what? Even if Andy doesn't want to do it anymore, I probably will still keep doing this for at least a while longer, maybe another season, another year, hopefully longer than that. But yeah, I definitely want to keep the experiment going and see what comes of it, or how it helps us grow as leaders. Cool. Well, let's get into our actual. I mean, I guess that kind of kicked off how we're starting
Yeah,
the retro, just
it's
to make sure we're aligned that we want to even do the rest of the retro today. So our format for our retrospective today is going to be keep, stop, start. So what should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we start doing? Since we've already established that the commitment to the podcast is worth the investment, let's start with the things that are working. So, Andy, what do you have on your list? What things should we keep doing? What's been useful? What's been valuable, worth it? Or what should we lean into even more for season two?
yeah. So I think it's helpful. when we like out of the gate, right, we set a goal to release 10, and we were super duper consistent right across that setup. And I think we should continue to set goals along those lines of, a weekly or a bi-weekly release over, a designated period of time. The caveat being, I think when we initially set this up, we both had a little bit more bandwidth in our work and personal lives than we do at the present moment. So I think that we probably need to keep that in mind when we set the intervening waypoints going up. Um, yeah, and I think and I like the format, generally speaking. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that. There, I like the content that we're talking about. Yeah, I'm thinking about changes more than keep, but I think the foundations are pretty solid out of the gate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think our the discipline and output I think was pretty good. Like we've talked about, doing more than 10, I would say, was a significant win, and so releasing these consistently, I think, is really helpful and valuable. Um, I think one thing that made it easier was there was a period of time where we were ahead. We'd basically been banking episodes, and so we'd record an episode that wouldn't come out for maybe 2 months or something like that, maybe even 3 months at some points. And I felt like when we were in that stage, it was pretty easy to keep doing because there was a bit of flexibility, and if we needed to miss a week of checking in or making a plan or recording, we were able to work around that. And then as we both started to get a lot more busy and things changed in our work lives and everything, and we got that amount of like time, it started shrinking and shrinking and shrinking until we had none left, and then it was basically really stressful to try to get. I think our last episode we were basically needing to record and then publish it, um, all
In
in the
like
same
24
day,
hours or
yeah, or
something like
something like
that.
that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would say that if we can um, keep that sort of a buffer and getting ahead of those episodes, I think that's really powerful. I think looking back, we did hit on some really important and relevant topics for 2025. So I think we should keep doing that, trying to keep focusing on topics that we think really matter or relevant to what's going on today. And I think part of that is that we were pulling from, things that were on top of mind for us, that we were experiencing at work or that we're seeing in the world around us in the news or things like that. So I think that's definitely something we should keep doing. Um, and then agreeing with you on the format and the style, I think the length has generally been fine. Um, Sometimes I see other podcasts that started off around an hour or 45 minutes, and now they're sometimes releasing episodes that are in the like 15 or 20-minute range. I guess if we get to a point where we cover everything in that short of a time, that would be okay. But I generally think having the extra time to explore the concepts and really dive deep has been pretty valuable. I think I know I already mentioned that our topics were relevant, but I think some of our specific topics were really good. I liked the 10x myth and that whole 10x episode a lot, and I really liked how that kind of seamlessly flowed into the concept of the glue people and the assists and how those connected. And I also really liked "It's All the Work." That was a topic that uh, one of my favorite directors of all time, one of my favorite bosses of all time, had talked with me about back then. And so being able to do a whole episode about that, I think, was really cool. So continuing to find um, topics that are meaningful to us, that we can have a great conversation, that I think would also be good for the audience, is definitely something I want to keep. And then lastly, I think overall, or generally, I should say, production quality has been pretty good. I think the audio is generally pretty good. We have solid content, and I think we typically are flowing well. And I will mention I didn't get a lot of user feedback, or I mean listener feedback, I should say. Sorry, I'm still in work mode right now, but
Yeah, no, it's all right.
didn't we didn't get a lot of listener feedback, but there was a couple of people. And these weren't like anonymous folks. These are people that I know or that we both know, who listened to an episode or two, and they gave positive feedback. They really seemed to enjoy what we put together, and I was told like, oh, that seemed professional and it seemed well put together. So I would say we should keep doing that and maybe even lean in to that a little bit. I know I've said a couple times to you, you might want to invest in a new microphone just to get the quality even higher. So maybe that'd be Something
Are
that
you
to,
saying my AirPods are not sufficient?
I mean, they're okay, but maybe not as good as a standalone microphone might be. So,
Fair, fair.
um, yeah, I think that's everything on my keep list. Anything else that you can think of before we should move on here?
No, let's move to stop.
All right. So now we know what to keep. Let's get into the hard part of this retrospective, which is stop. So, Andy, what do we need to cut? What was a drain? What didn't serve us or the listener well? What felt bad or didn't produce a good result? Were there any topics that in hindsight didn't align with our authentic voice? Or was there anything where we missed an opportunity to challenge each other, and maybe we should have, and instead we just kind of agreed with each other or let things slide?
Yeah. So, and I kind of alluded to it in continue as well. I think that we need to be more deliberate about our calendar, and I think that that's a just a learning lesson, right? So we put a lot of episodes in the bank out of the gate because we had bandwidth, and then our bandwidth has drained pretty significantly, especially we're talking at the end of Q4 now, but going through like Q3 and Q4. I think both of our lives got increasingly complex. And we didn't have an off ramp built in. So we kind of had to build an off ramp on the fly. And I think that we want to maybe proactively build those breaks into our seasons that we can kind of refill the coffers, maybe allow fields to be fallow for a moment, which we've kind of been doing lately. And also give us time to just like think and breathe. Doing this on top of both of us have meaningful full-time jobs and families and other commitments that we need to do. And this is kind of a bonus activity, if you will. So I think just making sure that we build in the space for that, I think is really really critical. Um, I think for me, this is could be framed as a stop or a start. But I I need to stop letting you drive most of the things, right? So like all of the marketing, like any of that sort of stuff, like that's all been on you. A lot of the like administration and topic creation has all been on you, and I've been more than happy to just like let you run with that. And I think the outcome has been great, but I need to stop being a crappy partner in that regard, right? So this is one like kudos to you, Ed, but also like I'm not effectively pulling my fair share on those sorts of things. And I need to like stop kind of ignoring those aspects of what we're doing on it. Um, I think as far as the other piece is like, and I'm pretty content. Generally, I'm not sure I have anything else that and I'm looking at your stop list as well, so I don't want to step on your toes. Maybe I should stop reading Ed's notes during the conversation. That might be advantageous.
Yeah, well, yeah. So here's some of the things on my stop list. One of them, and I guess this is maybe for me personally or as an individual rather than us together, but over preparation or maybe verging into perfectionism. I don't think this was a problem at first, and it was like there was a point somewhere in the middle of doing this, or it's I don't know, it's hard to figure out because right we were getting started, we're still figuring it out and trying to figure out what the structure should be and how we want to format these. But at some point, just kind of my own mental block was like, oh, I don't like I don't like where this is. So I need to keep polishing and I want this to
Mm,
be really well scripted. So it was like over polish and over preparation started to slow things down, especially for me. So it was almost like my own high quality bar demanded that I had detailed scripts, and then that ultimately made it hard to be sustainable. There was a couple times when we probably could have gotten together to record an episode, and I just didn't feel like I was ready because I hadn't prepared enough. So that might be something to stop doing, or at least figure out how to adjust so it's not as impactful. And as a direct result of that, I mean, I guess it could be there could be other traits or aspects as well. But I think as a direct result of that wanting to be prepared led to this being not sustainable.
Mm,
especially when things got busy. Like I think it was sustainable for a long time when we both had kind of more flexibility or a little bit less busyness going on in our day to day lives. But once things did get busy, um, I transitioned into some new clients and some new work. You started a new job, and I think we both just had less free time. And the free time I did have, I didn't want to spend as much of it preparing for this. So, especially
mm,
as I think I was starting to get a little burned out, I might still be, working through some of that. So, figuring out how to make this more sustainable, I think would be good. Um, I do think a couple times, there's this idea I've been thinking about, I'm calling it topic lag, and, it's not I don't wanna say that it was, "Oh, we thought of this topic because something was in the news and now we waited too long," because that was never our intent, right? We didn't want things that were topical because that would be, if you're too far removed from the news event when you're talking about it, then that episode's no longer as relevant. But I think what sometimes would happen is we'd get together and we'd have a great conversation about like, oh, here's like 3 ideas I had for podcast episodes, and we, maybe talk about each one for 15 or 20 minutes or something and jot down some notes. But then by the time we actually got around to recording the episode, it wasn't like fresh anymore. It wasn't top of mind. So it felt kind of hard to, oh, well, what was my headspace or my mind space when we started talking about this, and what it was that episode actually about. So I think closing the gap a little bit between when we have an idea for a topic and then actually recording the episode would probably be something that would help us out. Um, and I guess that's kind of a repeat. The process drag. I
mm,
mean, sometimes it did take me a long time to plan and script an episode. I think that had to do with certain topics that, like some of them that I was really passionate about or I knew really well inside and out. It was kind of like no problem. And some of the ones I was like, this is really interesting to me, but I don't necessarily know everything about it. Would lead to me trying to do a lot of research or preparation, which I think dragged it out. Um, I don't think any of our content was necessarily inauthentic per se, but as I was looking back at all of the episodes we recorded, I will admit I didn't listen back to all of them to prepare for this. But I do remember we did that ethics and leadership episode really early on, and I know we were still finding our voice and how we wanted to approach it. I think that was a great topic, and I think it's
mm.
especially relevant when we see what's happening in 2025 and everything. But looking back, I think it felt a little bit too academic or theoretical and not as aligned with like practical voice or practical experience as we'd like it to be. So I think
Yeah.
figuring out how to make sure that we keep that authenticity with the topics, and are able to connect with it better and not just like sharing research or something that somebody else wrote. I think is definitely something to keep in mind. Um, and then I was, with the rise of AI and everything, I've been doing a lot of experimenting on how to generate content and, posting on social media, like you were talking about marketing earlier. I think I was just posting on too many social media channels. I didn't really know where we were gonna have an impact or get visibility or whatever, so I was basically posting on every channel. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple that I wasn't doing, but, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, um, I think Twitter, I think Blue Sky, I think even Threads for a little while,
Yeah.
and looking at
And
the
it
numbers,
increasingly, I'm beginning to feel like they're all the same thing too, as they all continue to kinda cannibalize each other's feature set. Like, LinkedIn is increasingly feeling like Facebook 5 years ago, um,
yeah.
which is kinda interesting.
So, yeah, I think and doing it across channels, even with an AI assistant helping to do the stuff, it's still a lot of work or, at least the way I'm not an engineer, so maybe there's some way I could automate more of this or simplify it, but I don't think that it moved the needle that much to have them on that many channels and was too much effort. So probably paring that down and focusing on the channels that we think are gonna get the most visibility or have the most impact, which in my mind is most likely LinkedIn for us and the type of content that we're creating. That would also simplify the marketing process and once we record an episode, there's a process of editing it and then preparing show notes and preparing all of the social media content and scheduling it and everything. So that would certainly lower the lift if we were doing less channels there.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I was thinking of as I was preparing, and it's kind of funny, it's almost the opposite of your last stop, which is just the dynamic between the two of us. I think sometimes we have great conversations offline or when we're not recording, and then I think sometimes my level of preparation made it a little bit, I don't, it made it less spontaneous, and it made the dynamic um, maybe a little bit more forced than natural. And it was more about what was planned out than what came up in the moment. So I think
Mm,
sometimes that would, maybe made it so we didn't have an opportunity to challenge each other or take things in a natural way. So I think figuring out the right balance between preparation and spontaneity and sort of off the cuff would be something that we can keep working on as we go into the future seasons or future episodes.
yeah. Makes sense to me.
So that's my list. Anything else that you thought of as I was chatting there?
No, I'm looking forward to getting to the start list here.
All right. Well, yeah. So now we know what to keep and what to stop. So let's look forward, and this would be the start piece. This is forward looking, actionable steps. So, what should we start doing? What should we add or try? How should we evolve? And what new ideas, formats, or topics should we experiment with to make the podcast more valuable and sustainable?
Yeah, so I think I like the format overall, right? And I really resonate with your thoughts about the preparation for the format. I know it's super laborious. Yeah, you do a lot of scripting. And one of the things that I know we've talked about this, but I think would be a good thing to start would be moving to an outline format on the back end. So rather than, scripted portions written out in concrete prose, moving to bullets and outline with some data points. And the reason I'm really thinking about that is like if we were scripting, it would make a lot of sense if we were, telling a concrete story, or if we were, say, a research podcast where we were, talking about studies and really kind of concrete, heady sorts of things. But at the end of the day, this is much more of an experience and opinion oriented podcast, right? So we're talking about how we resonate with various topics or our thoughts or opinions on that. So I think moving, away from the classical music score and more towards the jazz chart is probably going to be advantageous. I think it'll also, lower the threshold for kicking things off, and also just kind of have like um, just more room for banter and spontaneity within the context. So I'd be really excited to move towards something along those lines. One of the things, and I kind of talked about this a little bit obliquely in the other pieces, is I love this idea of seasons, right? So we're now, I guess, in the in between season point, right? In between seasons one and two. Um, I think I think it might be useful for us to move to like a shorter season overall, right? So we had kind of come out of the gate and said that, yeah, we wanted to do 10. We ended up at 13, and then we were like, oh gosh, like we need to take a little bit of a break, right? There's just not enough back end support. I think moving towards like five or six in a row and then a brief pause could be a bit more sustainable, so we kind of build in breaks overall. We don't need to necessarily call them concrete seasons, but we could just, we're off this week. Moving in a bit more of an interrupted cadence that way, I think would give us some like built-in breathing room overall. And then I think also on the start is I personally want to just engage more, right? Like we've acknowledged that we have this podcast, but if we go look on like your LinkedIn and my LinkedIn, you're very vocal about it, whereas my general social media presence over the last like 5 or 6 years has been purely lurking. And I should probably be a bit more outspoken about these sorts of things. I think it's kind of cool. I'm proud of the result that we're putting out there, but my online presence does not reflect that. So I want to change that.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple things I was thinking about, and start. in this case, maybe we don't have to actively start all of these things, but these are just ideas of things we could start or could look into and see how it might fit in. um, I do kind of like that idea of maybe structuring the seasons differently, or doing season breaks differently, because we basically had all the episodes inside of 2025 and called that season one. But maybe, I don't, there wouldn't be anything stopping us from having quarterly seasons or 6 month seasons or whatever, and having a little break in between. So we'll have to take that one and talk about it and see how we want to approach it. A couple things I've been thinking about is, and this may be, some of these may be more time, like what available time do we have and how much prep can we put into them. But I might like to see about having some guests come on. And maybe it
Mhm.
wouldn't be, maybe this would be in addition to, not instead of the types of episodes we're already recording, but maybe an in addition to. Our podcast is called Leadership Explored, and we are exploring leadership. And I think it'd be really cool to explore it with other people and see, how do they define leadership? What is the best leader they've ever had? Or how are they being an effective leader today? Um, what are their favorite tips or tricks about communication, or what's one leadership thing that they learned from a mentor that made a big difference on how they lead. Yeah, I think things like that could be really powerful, so that we're getting more perspectives and more ideas. And having that be maybe a structured interview format that we follow consistently would make it easy, and it would also give, yeah, I think we've both worked with or had some great leaders in our careers. So having an opportunity to give them a chance to explain, like that director I mentioned, why did I like that director so much? Maybe maybe we could get him on and he could explain, in something that would help us understand what it was that made me see him as such a great leader. So that'd be
Mhm.
something that I think would be really cool to explore. And then also another format that might be interesting would be, um, if we do start to get more audience engagement and we grow our audience. We haven't really gotten any emails or mailbag type stuff, but I would really like to do listener Q&A or listener mailbag, and go through and answer questions. I'm sure people are struggling with stuff that they're not sure how to deal with, or maybe they have an idea but they want to hear how someone else would. So I think creating an opportunity for that could be really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I also really um I love the idea of guests too, and I was thinking about this as well, because both of us are coming from leadership, thought patterns in the technology space as well. And of course, the vast majority of the folks that we are exposed to are from there, but I can also think of some friends and other folks I know who practice leadership in different spaces. And I think it could be really interesting, not just to have guests on, but to have guests who are coming from different industries or different points of view. My suspicion is that there's probably a lot of overlap as far as, theory and approach and practice, but it'd be really interesting to talk to leaders from, not the software and software and services space.
yeah, yeah, for sure. We've already kind of talked about this one a bit, but I think we're still needing to find the right balance between preparation and the natural real time conversation. I want this to be really valuable for the listener, which is why I feel like I need to prepare. I mean, Andy, I've given a zillion presentations, and maybe I am a 10x from a preparation standpoint. Maybe for every 1 hour a presentation is, I might prepare a little bit too much sometimes, because I do want the quality to be there and I want the message to be clean and clear. Um, and so it was kind of a natural extension with this, that I would go into over preparation mode. So um, just figuring out that right balance, and creating more opportunities for us to disagree on something in while we're recording, or different things
Mhm.
like that. Not that I mean, usually when we disagree, it's like nuance or some semantics or whatever. We're not typically completely out of line with each other. But I think having more of that dynamic would probably be good. Um, and then we have a list of topics that we've already talked about. I think I mean, I don't know, every couple of weeks when I think about, oh, what topics might we do for a podcast, I can usually think of 3 to 5 more to add to our list. So, especially with all the stuff that's been happening in our lives, I think we do need to cover some really important topics like slack time. I think we should probably
Mm.
talk about burnout in the future. Um, I've been noticing there's a big lack of strategic thinking and understanding of how to approach strategy, whether it's IT strategy or business strategy, in a lot of the clients I'm interacting with, or even in like meetups or other events that I'm involved with, just talking to folks. So I think that we should explore some of that a bit more in depth and how to actually approach
Mm.
strategic thinking. And also, I think systems thinking might be an important topic for us to cover in the future. I'm sure there I could probably think of
And
like a dozen others really easily here.
yeah, and I would add to that, because those are all skills that I think are critical for architecting your career, right? And understanding what it takes to move across levels or to increase your blast radius, as I often call it at work. I think that that would be a really interesting conversation to jump into too. Is like how do you build your career? How do you advance in your career, and maybe debunk some of the myths around that, right? Because you see some people have these really rapid trajectories. I've also worked with a lot of people who just kind of work under this false assumption that saddle time is all it takes, and if every couple of years you should promote because you're entitled to it, which is patently false, by the way. So I think it would be really interesting to dive into that as a subset of those topics, right? Because as you develop those skills, your value to the company goes up considerably, right? Your leverage goes up considerably, and I think we can even talk about replacement cost, or like how you kind of assess your internal value to the firm that you're working at, and perhaps that'll be a move into like some negotiation sort of things as well. Could be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of valuable topics that we could cover that would give people tools to help them think differently or approach things in a more thoughtful and considered way. I think that especially in the IT world, it does seem like there's a lot of reactivity or a tendency to want to we got to get started on developing this thing or building this thing when a lot of the maybe planning or alignment hasn't happened yet. And so I think we could definitely I think there's a lot of topics, tools, and skills and frameworks and things that we could probably cover as well that would help elevate our listeners' leadership capabilities to just be a lot more effective and confident in what they're doing.
Yeah, agreed.
The last thing I had on my start list is, again, this is dependent on our schedules and how some of these other things we've talked about, like if we can find the right balance on preparation and all of that. But I would like to see if there's a world where we can get to weekly releases. I think when I look at other podcasts that are out there, it does seem like a lot of them are weekly releases. And one of the things I kind of wondered when I looked at our statistics and numbers is like, oh well, if one episode comes out and then it's 2 weeks before the next episode comes out, by then has somebody forgotten that this is out here to listen to? Are
Mm,
they looking forward to it? Where it seems like the weekly releases, there's a tendency for people to be like looking forward to that new episode every week. Um, I don't know with the way we've been delivering that wasn't really feasible for us. But if we were to start having guests on for every other episode, maybe and do those as interviews, and then the other ones were our topic episodes. That might be a good way to approach it. So I don't know that we'll be able to start doing that immediately, or if we will get to that this season. But it is something I'd like to keep in mind as we keep going and see if we can get to a place where even if we're not releasing every week, if we were able to record every week pretty consistently for a while, then that would give me a good sense that we could potentially start releasing weekly without it, impacting our delivery cadence or overwhelming us.
yeah, makes sense.
Anything else on your start list that you want to mention?
No, I think we've really covered it.
Cool. Yeah, this has been awesome. Now, normally at the end of a retrospective, we would go through these things and we'd assign action items and next steps and decide those. Andy and I will take that offline. We don't really need to work through the actual who's going to do what and how are we going to follow up on these things on a live recording, because that could be kind of boring or it could take a while to get through. But one of the things I like to do at the very end of a retrospective to close it out before we end for the day is appreciations. An appreciation is a non judgmental moment to simply call out one thing, large or small, that you value. It could be an appreciation for the team for delivering a challenging task, getting a new tool, or even something mundane like being able to work on an interesting problem or going on vacation. It doesn't really matter what it is, just that it's genuine. And what I've found is when I close out retrospectives with appreciations, no matter what happened in the retrospective, like maybe the team didn't deliver last sprint and it was a really hard conversation, at least we're closing out on a positive note. And if it wasn't negative, if everything's been going well and we're working well, just having that opportunity to call out somebody that did some good work or helped you in some way, I think it really helps build team cohesion and builds trust and psychological safety. So that's why it's something that I like to include in a typical retrospective. So I thought it would be good for us, Andy, to close out with appreciations, and I'll model what I would normally do when I run these with a team. Is I will start. That way, it's less scary for the rest of the team to do
Oh,
their
I was
appreciations.
I was all set to kick it off too.
Oh, well, I'll start this time. So, Andy, I
All right.
appreciate you doing this with me. I appreciate you listening to my thoughts, especially when sometimes they can be disorganized and maybe a little chaotic, or I haven't fully thought through that thought. So I appreciate you being willing to talk through those with me. And also, beyond that, is uh, that we talk sometimes, and we don't usually do this when we're recording the podcast, but we've talked through some pretty challenging or difficult topics before, things we're struggling with or that are, potentially embarrassing or might, in a lot of places, might make people feel shame or those sorts of things. So I appreciate that you're here and that we can talk about those things even when they feel uncomfortable. And I think all of it makes the show possible and it makes my thinking sharper. So yeah, I appreciate that we've been doing this.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. And I I appreciate you keeping all of the trains running on time, right? Like you're really kind of the heart and soul behind this project. I get to kind of come along for the ride, and I appreciate that more than I can effectively articulate. And beyond that, one of the things that I've really loved about this is like, so for anyone who doesn't know the background of our relationship, right? So we were former coworkers, and now we live, gosh, probably about 1,000 miles away. So we used to see each other multiple times a day through work, both on site and then remotely through COVID. And now we see each other basically never in real life. And I just really appreciate that this gives us a forcing function to maintain our friendship and continue to put care and feeding into our friendship, and that I think is the biggest upside to this is like, hey, if we continue to get to keep doing this project, then like, well, of course we're going to stay friends because like we talk on a weekly basis, or at least like, many times a week, because we're trying to do this thing together. And that adds a tremendous amount of value to my life. And I just appreciate you as a partner and as a friend, and wanted to share that as explicitly and publicly as I possibly could.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get a chance to work together again and all of this stuff we've been doing behind the scenes will make a really big impact on the teams we're working with or the company we're working for or whatever. We'll have to see where the future takes us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well,
Should
with
we
that,
should we close out this retro?
yeah. So with that, that's our season one retrospective. We've modeled the process of pausing, reflecting, and committing to change. We shared what we'll keep, the content and discipline, what will stop, especially the perfectionism and over preparation, and what will start. Maybe some new formats and topics will be in the future. Definitely new topics, but we'll see about some new formats coming down the line. If there's one thing for you to take away today, it's this: the honesty you bring to your own reflection directly determines the quality of your future direction. Retrospectives aren't just for fixing projects, they are a profound tool for personal and cultural growth. If you lead a team or just lead yourself, take the time to pause and ask those three questions. We aren't done for 2025 yet. We're planning one more piece of content before the year closes, a year to date reflection on leadership. This will be a higher level episode where we share our learned insights on major trends, how our perspectives have changed, and how we've grown as leaders. from our day-to-day work or simply by doing this podcast. So keep an eye out for that before the end of the year. Thanks for exploring leadership with us today on Leadership Explored. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What are the key things you think we should keep, stop, or start? You can email us at leadershipexplored@gmail.com or connect with us on LinkedIn. If you found this conversation helpful, please subscribe and share it with someone who leads. We're planning to be back with Season 2 starting in early 2026, and we'll plan to release new episodes at least every other Tuesday starting February 10th. Until then, keep leading with purpose.